Hello, everyone. In our last lesson, we learned about the crank connecting rod mechanism of a single-cylinder diesel engine and understood its components and working principles. I believe you now have a preliminary understanding of diesel engines. Today, we will delve into another important component of the single-cylinder diesel engine, the valve mechanism. The valve mechanism plays a crucial role in diesel engines as it is responsible for opening and closing the valves, directly affecting the engine's efficiency and performance. First, let's understand the task of the valve mechanism. The main task of the valve mechanism is to coordinate with each stroke of the cylinder to close and open the valves. It is divided into the valve assembly and the valve transmission assembly. Through the meshing of the timing gears of the crankshaft and camshaft, it drives the camshaft to operate the cams, achieving the opening and closing of the valves. In the process of valve operation, there are two important valves: the intake valve and the exhaust valve. The intake valve is larger to ensure adequate air intake. The exhaust valve is smaller because the exhaust has pressure. Next, let's take a detailed look at the components of the valve mechanism. The valve mechanism mainly consists of the valve assembly and the valve transmission assembly. First, let's examine the valve assembly. The valve group is composed of the valve guide, valve spring, valve stem seal, valve spring seat, and valve locking split. Its task is to keep the valve closed. Once installed, the valve remains closed. Valve. The valve comes into direct contact with high-temperature exhaust gases, reaching very high temperatures. Especially, the exhaust valve can reach up to 800 degrees Celsius. Intake valves are generally made of medium carbon alloy steel, while exhaust valves are made of heat-resistant alloy steel. The seal between the valve and its seat is achieved by a conical surface. Both intake and exhaust valves typically have a cone angle of 45 degrees, and the valve seat and valve head must be paired and ground together, after which they cannot be interchanged. Valve guide. The function of the valve guide is to direct the motion of the valve, ensuring that it operates with reciprocating rectilinear movement, allowing the valve to correctly align with the valve seat or valve seat insert. Valve spring. The role of the valve spring is to ensure that the valve closes tightly against the valve seat or valve seat insert. Valve springs are usually constant pitch cylindrical helical springs. Once installed, the valve remains closed under the action of the valve spring. Next, let's explore the valve transmission assembly. The task of the valve transmission assembly is to open the valves. This is accomplished by the cam lobe driving the pushrod to actuate the rocker arm, which then opens the valve. The valve transmission assembly mainly consists of the camshaft, tappet, spindle, rocker arm, rocker shaft, and valve lash adjusting screws, among other components. Let's understand each of these components. Camshaft. The camshaft is driven by a timing gear and is subjected to periodic impact loads. The contact stress between the cam and tappet is high, and the relative sliding speed is also high, resulting in severe wear on the cam's working surface. The relative angular position of the cams, intake or exhaust, on the camshaft is related to the direction of camshaft rotation and the interval angle between cylinder operations. To ensure correct valve timing and fuel injection timing, there are timing marks on the transmission gear, which must be aligned correctly during assembly. Tappet. The tappet transfers motion and force from the cam to the pushrod while also bearing the lateral force applied by the cam and transferring it to the engine block. Pushrod. The pushrod transmits the motion and force from the tappet to the rocker arm, requiring the pushrod to have good longitudinal stability and high rigidity. Pushrods are generally made of cold-drawn seamless steel tubes, with ball ends and sockets welded to both ends. Rocker arm. The rocker arm changes the direction of the motion and force transmitted by the pushrod and cam, passing it to the valve to open it. Valve lash adjusting screw. Used to check and adjust the valve clearance. Finally, let's summarize what we have learned in this lesson. The task of the valve mechanism of a single-cylinder diesel engine is to coordinate with each stroke of the cylinder to close and open the valves. This is achieved by meshing the timing gears of the crankshaft and camshaft to drive the camshaft, which then drives the cams to operate the valves. I hope you will review the material after class to reinforce what has been learned. After class, please think about these questions. What are the 5 major systems of a single-cylinder diesel engine? What components make up each of these systems? This concludes today's lesson. Thank you.